Hi, my name's Ash.
I'm Callie.
And welcome to Paved with Gold, the eating disorder recovery podcast. I would like to acknowledge the traditional landowners on which Callie and I are recording and extend the same respect to the traditional custodians of the lands from which you are all listening. So if you haven't listened to this show before, hi, thanks for being here. We love you. You have probably heard Callie referencing motherhood once or twice or maybe a few times.
Maybe like 1,000 times every episode.
Look, we love it.
I need it on a shirt.
We love it. But it's not just something that Callie is passionate about now that she's a mum. I think it's come up quite a lot in our stories, both of ours respectively, in other episodes about how our childhood sort of laid the groundwork for our eating disorders and things we wish that had been different. And a lot of that starts with parents and the dialogue that we grew up with. This is not we're just going to throw parents under the bus episode. Absolutely not, because we're not here.
We're not trashing parents at all, because as a parent myself, it is hard enough being a parent.
Exactly. So we thought it was essential that we find a guest that would be able to talk to us about that and all things parenthood and the influence that parents have on their children growing up, the impacts of comments that might be made, the impact of engaging in diet culture as a parent, and many more things. So, having said all that, earlier this year, Callie was able to attend the ANZ AED conference for eating disorders. And the next thing I knew that she was blowing up my phone, raving about this speaker she was listening to, who was presenting their research on the exact thing that we've been wanting to talk about. So we are absolutely delighted that our next guest was able to join us. She is a mum. Go figure. We're all about lived experience. She's also a youth worker, a researcher, and a fellow podcaster. So it is our great pleasure to welcome to the pod the incredible Lucy Dahill. Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, we are so excited.
Yeah. I'm
incredibly.
I know that Callie has been dying for this episode in particular. And look, I think everyone, at this point might know that I'm not a mother, and I don't intend to be a mother, except I'm the mother to a fur baby.
I was going to say, yes, you have you have an incredible greyhound, so kind of counts.
I do, but it's definitely not taking away from the amazing role that parents play in our lives. But again, I am a daughter, so I do have, this is something that's very strong and close to my heart, and I'd love to know more about all of the research that you're doing. So we are so stoked to have you on. We're just can't wait.
And can I say that having a fur baby is just as challenging as having a real baby when they are all babies.
Yeah, we were just talking about this when we first jumped on, Ash, and I was talking about how one of my clients has like a 6-7 month old Labrador, and how weirdly similar it sounds to my toddler.
Yep.
So, and Lucy was just saying that they've just gotten a new puppy. So,
of course.
Yes, we have an 8-week-old, and it is just like having an 8-week-old. So there we go.
Yeah.
But it's really lovely that you talk about, that lived experience, because everybody has a lived experience when it comes to how parents talk to their children and how we talk to each other. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing where you're going to go with the questions, because there's so many places we could go with it, and lived experience we all have.
Absolutely. I think everybody can really relate to an aspect of one type of relationship with their parents, whether it be, one thing or the other. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to get into this.
Or parent or guardian or aunt or uncle or any kind of, person who's meant to be forming a sort of guiding role in relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Callie and I are very lucky to already know a little bit about why you dove into the research that you have conducted. But we can't keep this to ourselves. So would you be able to tell our listeners what your research is about and how it came to be?
Yes.
It's a great story.
Yeah. Look, I grew up in a house where humor was a very big part of it. And, for me, I didn't realize kind of how detrimental that was until I got to sort of later teenage years. And I was just actually really wanted to say, could you stop taking the mickey out of me? Could you just, I didn't have that confidence to say to my dad in particular, just stop. and I would find myself really uncomfortable about the body that I was in, and just really pretty desperate to be a boy, and really thinking that, whoever made bodies had really made a massive mistake with mine, and what the hell was I doing in this female body. And so, I had my own little relationship with food that actually I had no clue was dysfunctional until many, many, many years later, way after having children, when I had problems with my bowels, and they said, well, you've got huge amounts of laxative use in your scar tissue. And I was like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? I haven't used laxatives. And they said, you've used a lot of them. And I was like, no, I haven't. And then all of a sudden, when I left the doctor's office, I remember going, what were they talking about? And suddenly it all just started coming back to me, all the diet culture that we had growing up, and trying to stay slim, and binge eating, and then finding a way to get it out. And it just didn't even occur to me. Not occur to me at all. So then I had my kids, and I was just really sensitive to the way I was communicating with them and how sensitive they were to the words that I was using around them. And then I noticed the humor, and just I think because I grew up with a lot of sarcasm, I've always had a bit of an ear for it, and I don't like it because I think there's always someone, it's funny to the person saying it, but it's actually uncomfortable to everybody else, either the bystanders who are watching it or the person on the receiving end who feels they should laugh because they want to please the person who thinks they're very funny, but actually it feels like a side swipe. So I've always been, a little bit on that. And I know that my dad hasn't got a mean bone in his body, but his comments were almost fed from where he was growing up. If you weren't slim, you didn't get a job in his industry. It had a life, it had a life risk factor to it if you were overweight. And so for him, his comments to us were about, he had girls, and therefore he needed to make sure that we were independent. We didn't need to rely on a man to give us our income in life. So he needed to make sure we had a job. And in his world, having a job meant we needed to be slim.
Wow.
So, that's generations. That's going back generations.
Yeah.
But we're still living those generations now, right?
Of course.
So then I thought, okay, I did a public health master's, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to find out what humor does in relationships, and really talk about the way we speak and how it matters. And we had to tie it to something, because you can't just say, oh, words matter, which is, really the absolute theme of everything I do. The way we speak matters. It had to be, well, what does it matter to? And so I landed on eating disorders. And, the research that's out there is very clear that mostly media and peers have a massive influence on the way we see ourselves. But also there was this research that was kind of bubbling in the background. It was the third part of it was parents. And so I thought, well, there's a lot of understanding about media. And most people have got a story about how their friends at school, they're traumatized by what they said and what they remember. But parents often either get blamed for everything or get forgiven for everything.
Or both.
Or both.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all your fault, but it isn't really, I understand. But it is all your fault.
You should have noticed this, but at the same time, they can't help it.
And hello, you should have noticed it, even though I'm really good at hiding it. And I actually went really hard to make sure you didn't see it.
Yeah.
But yes.
What, you can't read my mind? What do you mean?
Yeah.
What are you talking
even
about?
when I slam the door, how do you not know what's going on behind that door?
You should know specifically what has happened.
I suspect some of the listeners are going, yep, I know something about that.
I think we can all, doesn't matter what
so
you've been through.
really, that was the birth of the thesis. It was okay. The what I found from the master's research document was that there's definitely space for discussion and investigation into how parents' comments are perceived. So I had to make a decision. Do I talk to parents as well? And actually, I thought no. I actually want to know how they're perceived, not what their intention is, because I think we can all agree that the majority of the time, parents aren't actually going, I'm going to really piss my kid off. Sorry, I'll just in case.
No, you're allowed to swear.
Out. Okay.
Absolutely swear. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We swear. It's fine.
I'm going to.
We have said a lot worse on this podcast.
Have you? Okay, good.
Usually in relation to the BMI.
Yeah.
So, really we needed to look at, how sons and daughters perceived mothers and fathers' positive and negative comments. And it was as simple as that. That's quite a lot of angles, but also keeping it very simple. We could easily have gone into a whole load of nuances about that. But ultimately, we just need to know the black and white. Do our words matter? Are there any dyads? Are there any relationships between mothers and sons, mothers and daughters, fathers and sons, fathers and daughters that really matter? And if there are, what are they? How can we work with that? And what are the things that contribute, and what are the outcomes of interest?
Amazing.
I can keep going, but I don't, if there are
please do. I mean, I just want to say I love that you didn't include parents in the research, because I think you've nailed it there. It's the perception, because we all know, like you said, of course, you say something to your child, you're not going to mean to actually hurt them. Or even if you make a joke, the joke isn't said to, scar the person, traumatize the person, hurt the person, impact the person. It's said, in whatever way. So I feel like that would have skewed the data if the parent's voice was also in on it, because it's not about that. And that's across the board, right? Like, it's like you said, what we say, how we say it matters. It doesn't matter how you intended it.
It really does.
Somebody might receive it differently.
That's right. Yeah. And that's really what came out. We did prevalence. So prevalence, basically, we were looking at, are there comments? Are they commenting? They definitely are commenting. Mothers are commenting more than fathers. And so we looked at, why that might be. And we didn't ask why that was, but there could be an assumption that mothers might be around more. In the old style of fathers working more than mothers, it could be that. But, we have a lot of fathers being home with the kids now, and a lot of mothers working. So that could change in years to come, which would be fascinating.
Will be really
to see
interesting
if it does change. If their weight of the father's comments carry a little bit more, but there are more mothers' comments, and they comment more positively as well. So there's definitely more positive comments, but those positive comments also have associations with eating disorder cognitions, which are all the things that go to contributing to eating disorders. So even positive comments are not safe.
What kind of comments?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking it would be like positive comments such as like body comments, right? Like, oh, you look really, your body looks really good in that, or those
you
sort
look
of comments.
So slim today. Things like that.
Yeah.
Which I guess are very, very loaded and a very specific sort of weight bias, for example, right?
Well, it's quite a default, because you think of, I think of even my 17-month-old and the amount of comments that even she would receive, even as a baby, of, her looks. And that's just fascinating to me, because she's a toddler. She's a baby. She's a toddler. Why are we commenting on how she looks? So I'm not surprised.
Yep. It's very interesting. Most of the comments that we get are based on what we look like or are eating. Um, there's a perception about healthy eating, or well, interestingly, out of the qualitative data, which is where we ask them to, the same people that have been in the quantitative data who'd answered the surveys, we actually pulled out maybe 10 of those who volunteered to have more discussion with us. And they were saying that, on the whole, parents are talking about healthy eating, or really. But then one person said, but then they leave you to figure out what healthy eating is and what that actually means to them. And it
Yeah.
means something different to mum as it does to dad. And, for dad, it was very fitness orientated, but mum was usually the one that, for one of these people, took them to hospital. And so, they were more focused on keeping weight on, and I have to say, actually, in terms of was it a representative sample, in the people that did the qualitative, which was the interviews with me, we had one trans female, we had younger boys, younger girls, older girls, and we had people who were who had been very sick, and so for them the weight fluctuated because they'd had some physical challenges. Some of them had an eating disorder, but not all of them did have a recognized eating disorder or a diagnosed eating disorder. So I feel we did within those 10 people, we had a really juicy mix. They could really represent.
Did you find any huge differences along that population, like the differences, with your samples? Did you find any big kind of glaring differences from person to person, or like group to group from group to group?
What was interesting was, unfortunately, because of the data set we used, we couldn't report the non-binary because the one school had said that they wouldn't. In fact, I think it was either one or two Catholic schools said that they wouldn't acknowledge a gendered question. It had to be sex, which makes it completely binary. And so the moment you take them out, you lose a lot of power. So I got around it by saying sons and daughters.
Cool.
And how they identified at the time.
Well
because
done.
we are all sons and daughters. Yeah, well, I think it's very sad that we have
you have to find a loophole
and that they weren't allowed to. Yep. But at least we were able to represent, and at least we had. I mean, I think the young person who was trans female in the interviews, I suspect I'll do a whole paper on.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, I think it's definitely a part of the research that is 100% lacking, and we need more of it. So yeah.
Oh, there's nothing in the space really that like you can put in your hands and have as tangible, research. It's just so fascinating. Can we have a little bit of a talk about, I guess, as you've already touched on, there are a few different focuses or outcomes that you have found with your research. Could you talk us through a few of them, more particularly the areas around parents as influences, expressions and perceptions, and the concept of fertile soil and maturity?
Oh my goodness, you hit on my favorite expression, is fertile soil.
Good, because I want to hear about
it. And
I'm
coming in very fresh to this. So please tell me what this means and just plug into my brain, please.
Okay. So the way I look at it, it's like I have a picture of fertile soil, so earth, and you've got a seed, and you put the seed in the ground, and then within that soil, we each of us have a whole load of things in our background, right? So it might be people at school who are commenting. It might be the media. It might be your gender. It might be your culture. All of that is in the fertile soil. Where you live. how many siblings you have, whether anyone has an eating disorder or has had an eating disorder in your family, all in the fertile soil. So this is the seed that's going into, and then nothing to do with, you then have to have the water, right? So the water pours onto the seed and helps it grow. Those are the parents' comments. So I felt that, they come raining down, and depending what's in the fertile soil determines what buds and what doesn't. And you can either have your sun, which is, basically something that I always think of heat and light as something that can purify, that can clear, that can heal. It can either dry up those comments and they just don't bother you, or if it's a very damp soil, then actually part of you is going to rot. That it's going to affect how it grows. So to me, it was very much that what's in the fertile soil determined how you heard the words and whether you translated them as positive or negative, and whether you blamed your parents or understood your parents. So, again, in the qualitative data, a lot of the young people said, oh, they just didn't mean it like that. What they said was totally inappropriate. Some of them said, I gave them a look and they just knew that they had to reword what they were saying.
It's interesting.
And, just serious sass. It was fantastic. Sassiness. And, credit to those two parents of the young women who were speaking in that particular case. They both the daughters said that they reworded their comments, and it was just a move on process. Cool. So there is that ability to be a little bit a bit clumsy as a parent. I'm one of those. I say to my daughters and my son all the time, if I say something wrong, you just got to tell me, because I don't know what's going on and how you're hearing me, but I can learn if you tell me. And if you don't tell me,
you're never going to know. If you don't know, you don't know. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And they have to take some responsibility for that, because they're not communicating with me.
But also, obviously there is some responsibility on the child to say, oh, there is some responsibility on the child to, let the parent know that this isn't okay. But also the parent needs to say that those comments and being called out is absolutely allowed, because I think especially in the previous generations, it was like, oh no, you don't talk back to your parents. The parents are always right. You don't talk back. Be a good child and just don't question.
Absolutely,
just accept.
It was always, I always remember this. Always I had to apologize, because it was a strong narrative of, parents are always right. And I think that's changing now. This kind of links into what I was going to say about my 17-month-old, and something that I am very mindful of is always making sure I apologize to her if I need to. Today, for example, she didn't have a nap today. Not great. That's frustrating,
I condone.
So I yelled.
Now. You must be very tired.
Melting. Been up since 4 a.m. Anyway. But so that I had a few frustrated moments it's always really funny, because I get frustrated and I have these expectations, but I have to remember that they are my expectations, and that, she doesn't have to prescribe to those, and that, she's her own little person. I don't get to control her. But, so I got frustrated and I did raise my voice, and then I had to stop and be like, she's a toddler. She doesn't, I shouldn't be raising she's not going to understand because I've raised my voice to her. That's not an okay way to speak to her. So I apologize to her. Even my 17-month-old, I apologize to her all the time. So does my partner. And I think it's just so important, because we need to apologize as parents. We're not invincible. We're not perfect. And it's okay not to be, though. I think it's the response that matters.
So essentially what you're doing in those moments is you are setting the standard for what is decent and respectful. So you have decided in your home that shouting isn't okay, which is actually incredibly powerful, because really, is there any need to shout?
No.
What you're showing is that you've lost control. When I shouted, when my kids were younger, I'd lost control. So
absolutely.
Actually, control of my own self. And as you say,
absolutely, it's not about them. It's about you. Yeah, absolutely.
But also at the same time, it's not just that it's shouting isn't okay, but at the same time, if you do shout, because sometimes we do lose control sometimes, It's you just
It's
apologize
the
and then you
response
move.
that matters.
And then, yeah, exactly. It's the response that matters, and how you, not just responding in terms of words, but responding in terms of actions.
Mm. But you were talking, Ash, about the permission, the space to have permission to communicate. And it's not just a shouting house that tells you you're not safe to communicate. Sometimes a lot of unspoken threat happens in the silence, where you just know that you cannot speak up, or it's not your place to speak up, or you shouldn't say anything. And I think those homes are hard. We had one young man who shared that he would never tell his parents that what they were saying would upset him because it would upset them.
Mm.
And he
Mm-hmm.
had the highest level of anxiety. So that need to please, or that need to not upset the parents, or to feel that, if it's not an environment that could have those conversations, that creates a huge amount of anxiety, which perpetuates the eating disorder.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think that's a very common narrative with eating disorders. And I was actually going to ask you, with the samples that you did have of the ones that did have eating disorders, did you find that that was a more prevalent thing with those particular people?
Yeah, well, I didn't report this because that wasn't one of the studies that I did, but I did have a look myself, and what I did notice was that those two girls that I mentioned that really had quite a good relationship, interactive relationship with their parents, did not have a diagnosed eating disorder. Their
Interesting.
relationship, yeah, and I did find that really confirming for how we can change the trajectory. And there are lots of things that contribute to an eating disorder. I'm not a dietitian, I'm not a psychologist. I can't speak to all of those, but I can speak to the things that I've really picked up here, but I've also picked up in my life. And what I see is that those the space for communication is communicated both verbally and non-verbally, through tone, through observation of movement, all of those things. There's so much communicated that we have to actually do our own homework on what our relationship is like with food, weight, shape, and eating, to then know what we're communicating.
Absolutely. I think I'm fairly certain it's 2 or 3 years old. Children have the ability to take on negative ideals about bodies and food and weight and internalize them. And to me, that is just terrifying, because at that age, you sort of touched on a little bit earlier, there's all of these outside influences of school and, diet culture and all this sort of stuff. But at that age, really the only influence, yeah, they might go to childcare, but you're not really going to get a lot of that at 2 years old at childcare. Where that's coming from is within the home.
Absolutely. They're hearing language. They're hearing people comment on, people who are whatever they call. So, for example, in their home, it might be okay to call someone fat. In another home, it might not be okay, and they say, "I'm a plus size," or they may say, "I'm in a bigger body," or all different words. What is your normal in your home? Because that's what you then take to school or to preschool,
or they don't talk at all.
Or they don't talk at all.
Or they don't talk at all. Absolutely. Or on that, I guess, or they weaponize the word fat, don't they? So
totally.
Then if they hear that out in public, they might say that to harm somebody or hurt somebody.
Yeah.
And then there's that as well. Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah. And you don't know how those words are heard.
In my home, fat was a very loaded word. And
I think for a lot of people of our generation, and likely yours as well, right, Lucy? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, mainly for me, I just remembered, I think that probably the biggest impact that I had, and I know my mum is listening to this. Hi, Mum. This is absolutely not to throw her under the bus, and I've spoken to her at length about this. And please don't cry, Mum. Seriously, I can't handle another voice note of you being upset with me. It is upset in a crying way, not in a mad way. I think the biggest thing was hearing how she spoke about herself and thought about herself and her body image growing up. She would never say, because she would never openly comment about other people, but it was her internalized negative body image and the comments she'd say about herself, and just even the behaviors that she would exhibit, whether it be she'd always make a different dinner to everyone else and she'd eat separately, and she'd be on Weight Watchers and she'd be counting points. I knew what Weight Watchers points were by the time I was in junior school. Like I just knew that. And it absolutely was a product of the time. So I realized that was outside influences, the fertile soil, if you will. And it was just one of those things. But I just remember as a kid thinking, this is my mum, my absolute superhero, my idol, the person who I hold like dear to my heart. And this is what she's thinking about herself.
Yeah.
And if she's thinking that about her, that must mean, wait, the person who I think is perfect isn't perfect. And, my perfect person thinks she's fat. That must, and I know how, this talk makes her feel.
Word. Yeah.
And how that makes her feel. And that must be, oh, my mum, that causes my mum hurt. That must mean it's bad. So it's just, I think the body image and the way that we talk about ourselves is such, kids are sponges, and it forms such a core part, like a core memory in kids, I think.
I remember I saw a quote once, and it was like, be careful of the way you speak about yourself around your children, because they see you as their mirror. And that just hit to me because it's so true. Like, and you think about it, your kid doesn't, if you're at the beach and, you're in swimmers, your child isn't going to care what your body looks like in swimmers. They just want you in the water playing with them.
Yeah.
But in your head, perhaps, for a lot of people, that's what they are thinking about, rather than, I want to enjoy this time with my kid. And again, it's, this isn't to blame or, to criticize, but it's just so deeply ingrained, and it is really hard to work to shift that narrative. And it's why research like this is so important, so that we actually know tangible, research evidence data on what this actually does. Why it's important.
Yeah, it's hugely important for us to love ourselves, nurture ourselves genuinely. They can sniff, anything that's fake out a mile off. You genuinely got to love your body.
You have to do the work.
And then embrace it with what you're wearing. And then they get to be unapologetic about theirs as well.
And sometimes not even love yourself, just accept, or just, like this
take
is
the
my
focus
body.
away from it completely.
This is my body, and it's just how it is. Just neutrality. Those
is
kind of
what
things,
it is.
Yeah. But then also encourage that positive language about bodies in general, pointing out, just observing rather than applying anything critically. I think that is,
I wonder
really, really interesting.
If there's that space that we could go to, and I wonder, because it may be a big stretch, where we see our bodies as incredibly precious, and so what we're putting into it is the fuel that allows us to keep that fragility. I certainly know when I was growing up that I wanted to eat everything and anything that would stop me feeling, because actually I was so sensitive that it was just too much for me. So I ate to numb. Whereas now I eat to celebrate the fact that I'm sensitive and that I don't want to not feel it. And I think my shape has changed as a result of that. So that's been really interesting, having a different relationship with my body based on letting myself feel vulnerable and delicate. And, I enjoy feeling feminine now. I wanted to be a boy for most of my teenage years. So, but we're brought up to have a really bizarre relationship with food and not like ourselves. And that's what came out of the research is, it's complicated.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit? I think that leads really nicely into, the part of your research about parents as influencers. Can we chat about that? Because I think this leads very nicely into that. And I think it's really important for people to hear.
Yeah. So, what we found in terms of the positive and negative comments was that mothers had more comments than fathers. The I'm going to call them reactions. The associations from mothers' positive or negative comments were often probably more heavily weighted towards either psychological distress or eating disorder cognitions, or those sort of more weighty things that we don't want than fathers. But when fathers did comment, it meant something. It was significant, right? So they had fewer comments, but they were quite, they meant a lot.
Do you
Um,
know? Do you have any? I know that we talked about this briefly, Lucy, before, like off camera.
yeah.
But I'd love for you to talk about a little bit why you think that is, and kind of unpack that a little bit about why the weight of the words of fathers is a little bit more heavily skewed, like why they're held, why they're weighted more heavily, I should say.
Yeah.
And this is to do with both sons and daughters, correct?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, I'm certainly not the first with the research with the dyads, with fathers and sons. There's that role modeling, and that did definitely come out of the interviews. I listen to my father more because he's a man, and I want to be like him. So that was a very obvious relationship. Same with the daughters; they often said that their mothers were the person they looked to, but they also some of the girls spoke about their fathers around, one in particular spoke about their father and the relationship during formal and getting ready for formal, and how her father was going to help her, have a diet so that she could get into her dress. And, quote unquote, it was a bit extreme.
Oh my
But,
gosh.
and it was just really interesting to
Wow.
see that, the father perhaps, and I wasn't in their life, so I don't know, but what it felt like was the father was trying to please the daughter by giving her what she wanted, which was to be able to fit into this dress. But he was a triathlete, and
Ah,
therefore, he
Wow.
had
I
a
can
she
imagine.
as quote unquote, for her words, was, he has a slightly extreme way of eating and cutting his weight in order to fit the
Compete.
weight for the bike and compete and everything else. Um, so it was really interesting. But their weight, the father's comments weighed a lot to the girls, in a different way to the boys. Um, but the when we looked at quality of life, which was the longitudinal, which was, when you look at something over time, we have the snapshot of what happened in 1 year, and then we look at it a year or so later and say, well, is it still happening? Does it change over time? And what we found was that we introduced, and had a look at quality of life, and the mothers' comments, actually, the quality of life comments, even though lots again goes into those, they were more positive. It's like, even though, in the short term, sons and daughters have had trouble hearing what their mothers were saying, in the long term, they were pleased to have those conversations, whereas it was much more mixed with fathers. And I think that comes back to, I mean, again, hypothesizing, just having putting something out there. It's because, again, fathers may not be as comfortable to have those conversations because they either may not be used to having them themselves, or they're worried about the outcome of them. Whereas mothers are more prepared to just go in there, have that conversation. It needs to be said. It might be, the fathers may just have very short conversations. In the qualitative results, really, fathers, oh, they don't say very much about it. That was the comment from most of the young people that we interviewed. Whereas mothers said a lot, but when I asked about humor and sarcasm and comments, dads were the ones that were the only ones that came up with that humor.
Yeah.
Mums did not use humor with weight and shape or eating. Fathers were the only ones.
I wonder, do you reckon that's because weight loss, particularly from that generation, was seen predominantly as a women thing.
Oh, I would agree with you. My research did not go into that, but I would 100%
We can
agree with you.
Hypothesize, yes.
Speculate.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, diet is obviously, as we know from the research, again, a massive risk factor for eating disorders.
Absolutely.
Massive,
Yeah.
massive,
Oh,
massive.
yeah.
And when
Yeah.
we see our parents' diet, we then,
Yeah.
as you say, which I love the way you did that. We look at these people that we adore and they're our champions, and they don't like their bodies. They're trying to change their bodies, or you go, okay, well, if you don't love yours, then there must be something wrong with mine. Sorry,
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And I can imagine that if there are any parents listening who are not happy with their bodies, that may sound like well, you should just give up, and you can't, like give up on your ideals of losing weight or things like that. We're not saying that at all, because there are some people
putting on weight.
Or putting on weight, correct. And I think that I think we chatted about this, Cows, in our episodes with Ellen and Alana, that we can't dismiss people's desires for weight loss.
Yeah.
But I think they absolutely need to be had, and these intentions of weight loss have to be in conjunction with something else. So I want to lose weight, or I want to lose weight, so I can do something in line with our values and things like that. And it all comes down to like a positive way of spinning it, but also kind of shielding that sort of negative talk from.
But also just to, like, keep that away from your little ears anyway. Like,
absolutely.
that might be your intention, but you don't need to actually tell. Why are you telling your child that? Like, it's not really appropriate, I think. I just don't think it's appropriate, to be honest. And I don't know. I'm happy to be challenged on that, but I just don't think it's appropriate in any kind of sense to be talking about that with your child. I just don't think it is.
Absolutely,
because they whether it's a positive thing or a negative thing, your child is going to take that. Like, it's I guess it's. We were talking about it a little bit earlier, weren't we? Like the perception versus the intention, right? Your intention might be to just explain it, or normalize or whatever, but we don't know how your child is going to perceive that. And so I just think protect them. Why? Like, what is that? Like, I would prefer to overprotect than underprotect.
But also not be secretive, because I think kids are way too perceptive.
They're not stupid. Absolutely. I think we have this narrative that kids are stupid. The kids are not stupid.
They are so not.
They really are not stupid.
A lot smarter than most people give them credit for.
Well, if they can pick up that it's not safe to tell you something because they think you'll be upset by it, they have read the situation multiple times over. And if they have anxiety, they've probably role-played the situation multiple times over to see a few outcomes and which one would be the best one to do, then to give that one that they think is most appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
I think one of the things that I picked up a lot was, we can normalize family loyalty. There are dangers in family loyalty where we agree to protect each other from calling out what's not okay and what might upset someone. And, that in-group permission that we give to, I won't say anything if you don't say anything, which could potentially normalize abuse in future relationships, so that, your children grow up and go into relationships where, their partner may comment on things that actually are unkind to them, but because they've been taught not to challenge and not to speak up, then they don't. And we have just rates of domestic violence and normalized verbal abuse and coercive behavior that we kind of, in our families, we need to make an active choice to call out what is psychologically inappropriate coercion.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
absolutely.
I think now would be a good time to mention that while we're talking in the context of eating disorders about the the impact that words can have on kids in this context, it absolutely can be applied in multiple things, just like you're saying. It's the environment,
Absolutely.
the way that the comments that you make and the way you act and the way you treat others, it's all impacting your kids. And I think
absolutely, gosh, it's something that it's another, it's another little passion thing of mine. But to talk about is that what you teach your child, what you make accepted within your home is what they will take outside of the home. It's what they will grow up with. It's what they will then leave the home and think is normal. And, we hear it so often of, people potentially in abusive or domestic violent relationships. And it's kind of like they don't know that because that's what they've grown up with. And it might take somebody else to be like, hey, that's kind of not okay. And they're like, what do you mean? That's normal. That's all I know. And we know that happens. That is so common, so common.
And things like substance abuse as well, alcohol, those kind of things, everything, gambling.
Well, it's generational. It's just, and I guess it's kind of like, and when you were sort of telling us a little bit, Lucy, about right at the very beginning, a little bit about your story, growing up and stuff like that. I always remember, so I've been in a domestic violent relationship, and I always remember, and obviously with my lived experience of having an eating disorder, when I found out I was having a daughter, I was terrified. I cried. I was excited. Girls are the best, but I was terrified because in me, I was like, oh my God, she's going to have a genetic disposition to eating disorders. I've been in abusive and domestic violent relationships my entire life. My relationship now is the best relationship, ever. I'm so lucky to have healed so much to be able to allow somebody back into my life. So incredible. But we love him. But that has been my history. And so, and everything else that comes along with being a woman, a woman, identifying as such, it's a lot. And I remember when I found out I was having a girl, I cried. What am I bringing her into? What world am I bringing her into where women are abused at alarmingly high rates compared to our male counterparts, where, all the different issues, sexual assault, everything, eating disorders, she's going to have a genetic disposition. I was like, oh my God. But then I had a realization that actually I can almost control this. I can't control it completely because she's going to leave the home and I can't control what goes on outside the home. And that terrifies me. But I came to a realization that actually, do you know what? She is going to have a genetic disposition to eating disorders. And that means that I am the best mum for her to have because I am knowledgeable, I am educated, I know. And if I don't know, I will research, I will ask, I will find out. I will talk to my partner and we have very open conversations about language and, how we speak to her, how we treat her, how we repair everything. So whilst I was terrified, I had this realization of like, no, it's going to be okay because I know I can be on top of this stuff. But I know not everybody can be. And that's kind of, sorry, my little tangent that I just went on.
It's why your research is so important, I think is what she's trying to say.
Absolutely. It's why when I sat there listening to you, I was like, oh my God, because I had so many mum friends that, I would talk to about perhaps the language they would use about themselves and their bodies around their young children. And they would be like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize. And, it's just so nice to now be like, here is the research. This needs to be heard. This is actually so important to prevent not just eating disorders, but to prevent all of these other issues as well. And it is so vital. I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, it's beautiful, but it's also beautiful because what it recognizes is that we do as parents, we do what we do, and then our young people go out into the world and they will experience it through their own lived experience. So our job in those early years is so important. I would say right up until puberty, right up until say, 11 and 12, your job is to give them the most solid foundation of absolute love that you can, so that they know who they are, they know what they like, what they don't like, how to say no, how to commit to life, how to work, how to do jobs, all of those things.
Boundaries.
So that when when it all kicks in, when all the hormones change and all of that happens, they've got a solid foundation to stand on.
And also
And
once they start having a little bit more independence as well, when they start sort of spreading their wings a
Absolutely.
little.
yeah,
Yeah.
well,
Which I'm sure you can talk on very well, Lucy.
Yeah, actually, we are sort of tap dancing near a question that we do want to ask you. So we'll formally open the door to it. So like we hear it all the time, especially on like news cycles. You can't protect your children from everything. The world is a scary, scary place. And obviously we totally agree with that. But I think, Kals, you can probably talk to this more than I can, but I think we often hear it as kind of a weapon to expose kids to some like very not so helpful rhetoric around diets, bodies, health, and a whole bunch of sort of things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think of, I guess maybe we could use, I don't know if you saw the big controversy around a Bluey episode, Lucy. I'm not sure if you saw that, but it was basically about where Bandit, the dad, decided he was going on a diet and a health kick. And it showed the scales, it showed a number, and this is meant to be a show that I love this show, and this is not, we're not cancelling Bluey at all because it's an incredible show, but they did potentially do some harm there. And it's, if we think of the age group that watches this show, it's quite, but I think the sort of the commentary that came out of that when they were kind of called out for it and asked to fix it, and we want to be mindful of having this these conversations around our small children, like they don't need to be watching this on television. There was a lot of conversation around like, well, that's the real world. Well, they do need to be healthy. Well, if that, they do need to be mindful of the number on the scale. Well,
they're going to learn it anyway.
They're going to learn it anyway. That's the real world. So why not expose it to them now? And I was like, oh my God, because they aren't equipped yet. They aren't equipped. And yes, we can't protect them from everything. We know that. Like, sadly, I wish we could, but we know that. But also we can control the narrative to, I guess, give them the best tools to be able to go out into the world and like survive. Well, hopefully.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how parenting is kind of a protective factor?
Yes, there was a question in that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. This is, we're arriving at the question.
That's the question. I need to keep getting out of my tangents.
No, we love your tangents, Kals. Like, but yeah, we know that you've spoken before about parenting being this protective factor from outside influences. So, and it kind of does make everyone kind of, I think parents should be aware of this. It's like, no, you do have the power to sort of shield your kids in a certain way to a degree. But can we hear a little bit more about this concept?
Yeah, look, it's so, it's so important to do, and other people have done a lot more research specifically into media and its influence. But what I have seen and what I've experienced is that if you talk with your young person with your child, about what you're seeing on television, about what you're seeing as you walk around the shops, when you walk past underwear stores and the size of the mannequins in the window, just to nominate where it's warped, where when you hear it in the media, go, did you hear that? That was outrageous. Just have those conversations about what is imposing an ideal on you, but questioning media all the time, questioning who's behind the marketing campaign. What are they wanting? For example, when I did my masters and we were looking at, the influence of food, and we were looking at, how responsible marketing was for the major problem that we have with sugar now. And they were sharing with us that the afternoon tea that we all, which was probably around when I was a young child, that came in because they needed something for corner stores to sell in the afternoon, because most people did their shopping in the morning and that was it. They were cooking for the rest of the day. So they needed to have a reason to stay open. So they designed this afternoon tea, and a finger of fudge is just enough to give your kid a treat and it won't spoil their dinner, and you can have a Milky Way and it's as light as anything. It was all marketed
The
to not
spoil your
spoil
dinner
your
comment.
appetite,
Oh.
but to give you a treat in the afternoon. So,
yeah, wow.
you know, we need to be able to say that's outrageous. Look at that, or you know, the fizzy drinks, just looking at who is behind it, who owns that company. The water, oh, they're doing flavored water now. Oh, look, the same company that owns that owns that. Just being able to talk, what it does is it gives them inquisitive minds and it gives them questioning minds, not so that they will become complete, you know, skeptics or victims or anything like that, but so that they have the kind of eyes and ears that just does not accept a trend that they don't agree with. That's my tangent, you know, and not so
No,
much what I
yeah.
covered in the research, but it is the way parents can be the most incredible protective factor. And that did come up in my research, that parents can be very protective.
I was going to say, that component didn't it? Yeah. Can we talk about that within your research as well? What you found with that?
Yeah, look, I'll see if I can find some quotes because you know, there was one of the girls, Elizabeth, talked about her friends who there were a lot of eating disorders at school, but she felt her parents didn't really talk that way, so it didn't really bother her. You know, some of
Yeah,
them said the
wow.
way my parents brought me up kind of helped me not take that on. I mean,
Wow.
that's so powerful.
That kind of says it all, though, doesn't it?
Hmm,
That
it really
absolutely says it
does.
all.
Yeah.
Because you can so blame, like you think of like all girls schools, right? And it's
Oh
such a
God,
like,
don't even
you've
get me
gone to an
started.
all girls. I know I'd struck someone here with you, Ash, but you think of like an all girls school and you think of like, oh, well, that's, a breeding ground for an eating disorder. But in saying that, exactly as you said, not every girl that has gone to an all girls school has had an eating disorder. And why is that?
Yeah.
Parents.
Yeah. We're very, very powerful, very important. And, you know, if we see, as parents, if we see ourselves as custodians of our children, as opposed to owners of our children,
Oh, you've
then
just like you've just like music to my ears. Oh my gosh, it's such a gripe
yeah,
of mine. It's like it is though. That's such a relevant comment because there's such
yeah,
this ownership sometimes over
yeah,
children,
yeah.
rather than actually we want to foster this ability for them to become their own person. I don't want to own my child. I want her to be her own person, but I want to guide her to be who she should, like who she wants to be.
Yeah, I think it rings true to something that I think you said, Lucy, when we chatted earlier in the week, and something that you say all the time, Kals, which is little people and children or they're small humans, but they're big humans in small bodies.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like they are like they're not a toy. Like they're not something that you own. They are their own little person. And we were speaking about it earlier, Lisa, like how smart they are. My
Mhm.
17-month-old, like sometimes I'm talking to her and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm trying to reason with a 17-month-old. But like you said to me, no, keep doing that because that will land somewhere. Keep doing that because that's what she will then learn. And absolutely.
How does a toddler know exactly how to get you to give in? You know, I'm really sorry. They have read you.
Oh,
They know that you're tired. They know the moment you want to sit down. You know, if they ask maybe the seventh time, they'll get to watch what they want on television, or you know, they'll get that food because you just need to finish this Zoom call.
absolutely. I was going to say, what, like parenting is hard?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a roller coaster of rapid learning and doing the best you can with what you have at the time, which I think is very relevant for, most parents, and still, historically and now. And
I don't think that ever really changes.
I don't.
Does it?
You do, because you don't know what you're doing half the time. You really actually don't. You're just rapidly learning. But so you are doing the best you can with what you have. And obviously we just know more now. But anyway, I won't go into that rant. But I do love the point around perception doesn't equal intention. And I just thought that I would love to talk about that, because it can be so easy to run off with a narrative of blaming people, and we don't want to be blaming people. We're not blaming parents for, the way that they've parented, because again, they've done the best that they could with what they've had. And, generationally, like we've kind of already touched on, the past generations, that is what was done. That is what was kind of normal. But, and that's changing now. But yeah, I just want to kind of touch on the perception doesn't equal attention. I just thought it might be helpful to unpack that with parents, because I'm not expecting perfection, but yeah.
And I think for parents of people with eating disorders especially, I think they can feel this tremendous guilt. And again, I know my mum's listening, and I know that
same with mine. Yes.
Yes. I know that she has felt tremendous guilt, especially listening to this podcast and being like, if I only knew then what I know, what you're saying now. And it's like, I didn't even know this, so it's all good.
Actually, yeah, I actually spoke to my mum, Lucy, after I attended the conference and listened to you. I called my mum the next day, probably after I emailed you to talk about it, because I wanted to talk to her about it and just kind of clock, her reaction with it. And she was, she's always really amazing at taking things on board and reflecting and stuff like that. And she was really open to the conversation. But I could also tell, she was a little bit hurt, because she was like, oh my gosh, like, I think she said to me, oh, Cal, like, did I really, did what I, things that I did or said, did they really impact you in that way? And I'd be like, yeah, mum, like it has, and I'm not blaming you. It's not to, make you feel bad, but that just is what it is. But yeah, I just thought we could touch on that.
Absolutely. It is the biggest thing that I was asked every time I published a paper was, they all said we mustn't blame parents. And I 100% agree. There's an expression in when you do your counseling, and it's about naming, shaming, and blaming. And I feel like I've been named, shamed, and blamed by my kids multiple times for all sorts of things that I have done, none of which I've ever intended to do. But it is we're learning, and there are going to be things that we have done which are going to have been perceived as unhelpful or contributing to something that they're going through. But we are not responsible for their eating disorder, because we are not in their body. We're not stopping them eating, or we're not making them eat. But we can provide a space where we are more aware. And so having those conversations, finding out what is helpful and what isn't helpful to them now, and to our children now. There were times when I felt, what did I do? What have I contributed to? And I really felt for my parents, do they feel anything, in terms of the conversations I've had with them. And I really haven't had very many conversations with them. I did interview them, funnily enough, because I thought it would be very interesting to do intergenerational interviews, just to find out what they thought. And, when I started the interview, I could tell in both of their voices, they were really scared that I was going to be shaming them or blaming them for something. And I absolutely don't. I am a fully grown adult. I can decide what I take forward in my life, and I do not choose to take any of that forward with me. I make the decisions for myself now, and I had the most, incredible upbringing, because I'm who I am now. So that forms part of me. And equally, the gift that they gave me was the ability in my head to go, I didn't think that was too hot. I don't think that was too great, but I don't actually have to take it with me going forward. And so if, with my kids, I've often said to them, look, you know what? I didn't do everything perfect, or perfectly. So you're going to have to decide what you take forward with you and what you don't. And I have said that to them from as long as I can remember. But now they're all over 18 or over 21. I'm like, honestly, you're adults. You need to do you now, and go get the counseling if you need to. Say anything you need to about me. But my part is is over a long time ago, my parenting
Can't
book.
redo it.
I can't redo
Yeah, you
it.
get the one opportunity.
Yeah, and there was
Yeah.
nothing malicious in the way I brought you up, so how you perceive what I said or did, um, all I can say is that I did the best I could. And and let's keep that dialogue open now, so we can understand, so that if grandchildren are around, or if we're foster parents, or in loco parentis for any of the people in our community, because I believe it takes a community to raise a child, that we actually are that person for someone else, or we're that ear for someone else. Because the perception, I am the receiver of the perception, how I perceive other people talking to me, as much as I am an influencer in how I am perceived. So I work on my intention with what I'm saying, and then then hopefully it comes across as neutral as possible. But if it doesn't, I actually don't know what fertile soil in their life it's falling on, and that actually is none of my business. They have to then work out, and they have to work that through. And so I say that to
I like
all the
that.
young people I work with. I potentially will say things that will trigger you, because I don't know what your background is, and you're going to have to either explain it to me, or understand that there is no intention of malice in what I'm saying.
Yeah. I love that. And it kind of links back to what we were talking about earlier of having a home, creating, I guess, a home where, perhaps it is open to, constructive criticism, or, feedback, or, being able to talk about it.
No perfection.
You are going to mess up, you are going to say the wrong things, you are going to do things, but then it's kind of what happens after. Does that then just, grow in silence? Or are they able to come and talk to you about it and, bring it up and have a really constructive conversation and, figure out, what's a better way of me communicating what I actually wanted to communicate? Or do you know what, Mum, I don't like you saying that at all. Okay, now I know.
Yeah. And can I say, my kids have shared some things with me, and I've gone into a I don't know, I did that. And I've gone into a whole, sometimes crying, and they just come back to me afterwards and go, by the way, I don't think I can tell you that again, because honestly, the drama that you went into didn't make it so ezy. I'm like, oh,
that
crap,
is
I've
so
done that
relevant.
wrong as well.
Yeah. Oh, God. Okay. Take that on board.
Keep it light, people.
Yeah, I agree. I can be a very
then take
person
it to your counselor.
Yeah, exactly right. And as a parent, right, I guess if you are opening your home up to, please, I want my child to talk to me. I want them to let me know if I have hurt them. But then it's something that's very relevant, because I am I'm an empath. I'm a very sensitive person. So I have to reflect and kind of work on being able to receive that and not put that then back on my children. So that's actually a really good point, and something I need to probably continue working on and thinking about and being aware of.
This has been such a great chat, and not that this hasn't been full of high notes, but we love finishing on a high note, just to kind of keep it light and fun. So one thing, Lucy, can you tell us some of the things that you have loved learning while being on this research journey? What have you learned that has really stuck out to you? It's that has informed you in the way that you kind of parent and live your life and things like that.
Well, it has been the most privileged journey, because the people that have done the interviews, the people who have, responded to the survey, the interviews, they let me into their lives, and I've learned so much about myself through this process. I've learned so much about how I talk, and how, the throwaway lines, they are never throwaway lines.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of fun trying to work out what to do next, and it's actually been very easy. It's all going to be about fertile soil, but
amazing. Good.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of. It's been the most fantastic journey, because I've been able to clear out a lot of my gunk, but I've also been able to confirm that sarcasm was, and always will be rubbish. Don't use it. Don't do it. And my little, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 13, 16-year-old self is going, see, told you so.
100%. I love that so
And I love
much.
that.
Love that so much. I always remember, if just one person is not going to find it funny, might perceive it to not be funny, then it's just not funny.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter, if you think they're being sensitive, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. It is just not funny.
No.
Yeah. And I think like just sort of like rounding all of this up, I don't want people to think that, every single thing that you say is going to be policed, or that you have to constantly watch what you're saying, and that, people like you might say things that, if you pardon my French,
that you think is funny, but it's not.
That, but also that might screw you up, right? Or might screw your kids up. Like that, those kind of things happen. And I think it's exactly what we were saying, is it's how you respond. It's kind of the holistic approach in how you sort of, the environment that you create, the environment that you foster, and those kind of relationships that you build. I think if you're consistently doing things that are negative or perceived negatively or less helpful, or saying comments, then that is kind of when you need to sort of turn attention. But it's not like helicoptering every single thing that you say, or policing your behavior, because that's not that.
Think about it,
that sounds like a lot of work. And
well said, Ash.
Parenting is hard enough.
Keep it simple.
I was going to say, you think of your fertile soil, one comment could just be one tiny little drop of rain.
Exactly. But if you have
instead of having a whole downpour,
then we have more of an issue.
Then that could be a problem.
Yeah, it's so beautiful, and just know that actually the care and love and warmth that you provide in a family goes a hugely long way. And I've seen families where the parents are desperate to help the young person understand why they've got their disordered eating or their diagnosed eating disorder, and working as a family is really important, because we don't know where it comes from until we bring the family together. And then usually when you're sitting around with someone who isn't part of that pond, you suddenly go, oh yeah, look, I've just done it. Oh, you've just done it. Oh my gosh. And you can, if you stay light with yourselves and each other, then actually the healing is very quick. But it's knowing to, not have that judgment and not have that shame, and just go in and say, right, I want to get this scourge out there, because eating disorders are vile. They can get in there and they can embed. So let's just do everything we can to build that sense of who you are beyond the outside, but from the inside out. Like, build who you are on the inside out.
Yeah.
We love ending on a. I
was going to say,
a great quote, right?
That was perfect. You wrapped that up just perfectly.
It has been so lovely to hear you talk about this, and clearly something that you're so passionate about. And if you would like to hear more from Lucy, which I strongly recommend that you do, you can check out her podcast, Stay in the Loop with Lucy, which is available on SoundCloud. You could also go to her website, lucydahill.com, Lucy, LucyDahill.com. All of those links will be in the show notes, as per usual. But thank you so, so much, Lucy. It's been an absolute pleasure. We really appreciate you dedicating your evening with us.
Yes. It's been a good way to spend it.
Thank you both very much. It's been an absolute honor. Loads of fun.
Thank you. I would love to stay in contact. I will be watching for when this, research on fertile soil is, as you're doing it, hopefully, and once you've finished it, because it's just such a great analogy, such a great way to think about things, and simplifies it for people.
It simplifies it, and it can actually give a kind of like a reference point, right? For if you're saying something like, is this how is this going to impact? And also makes you more aware of what is in each other's fertile soil.
It's not all on one person.
And it's not just for children.
Nah,
it's not just for children either. It's for all of us. And so if
I love it.
If someone reacts in a certain way and you are confused about why maybe someone reacted that way, it's like,
could be a whole bunch of different things.
It could be their soil. It could be
absolutely
it's in the soil. Yeah. No, thank you so much.
pleasure.
That's all for today's podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. And we would love if you'd leave us a cheeky rating or review. It really helps us out. You can follow us on Instagram at pavedwithgoldpod, send us an email at pavedwithgoldpod@gmail.com, or visit our website pavedwithgoldpodcast.com. All of those links will be in the show notes along with extra resources as per usual. And until next time, stay safe and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye.
Bye.
This podcast is general in nature and has not taken your personal circumstances or medical history into account. We are here to share our own experiences and the things that we have found helpful throughout our own personal recovery journeys. Please remember that each person's journey and circumstances are different, and not all of the information contained in this podcast may be relatable to you. It's important you consult your own GP or recovery team to seek out tailored advice before making any important decisions relating to your own health and recovery process. If you have found any of the content in this episode distressing, please contact your care team or a medical professional. If you or someone you know is in crisis and needs help now, please contact emergency services in your region immediately.